How do you want to do it? How do you want to start?
Okay. Well, we'll start with a couple of obvious places. First, we obviously got to introduce ourselves, but also recognize that we are talking about Podcamp. So just a quick background before we introduce ourselves. Podcamp is Canada's largest, this is what it says on the website, Canada's largest and longest running 2-day digital media conference. It's usually held in downtown Toronto. And it's it mainly is podcast, but it's really supposed to be like new media. So anybody that does like a web series, anybody who's kind of making digital stuff online. This year was held at the George Brown College School of Media and Performing Arts campus on Richmond Street. And this is the one right beside the George Street Diner. Did you end up going to the George Street Diner during the 2 days?
I did, but I made it.
Yeah. If anybody doesn't know or hasn't seen it, trust me, you know the George Street Diner. It's been in a ton of movies and TV shows. I think it was in a recent episode of Reacher on Prime Video. It was in The F Word, where it hosted a really cute date. So if you're ever in the neighborhood, there's one podcast, or I guess recommendation right off the bat, right? Go check out the George Street Diner. All right, but we're going to be talking about Podcamp, but I guess we should introduce ourselves. So you can go first, I guess, ladies first, and then, so introduce yourself, your show, and we got to do a nice, fun icebreaker. Okay. Introduce your name, your show, give us a little bit of a teaser of your show, and for the icebreaker question, who do you go back in time to see? If I give you a time machine, who do you go back and see? It can't be like It can't be like Taylor Swift or whatever. She's still around or whatever. Beyonce doesn't count, but you can go back in time and see Destiny's Child because they're not around anymore. All right? So, yeah, there you go. That's the icebreaker question. Who do you go back and see live? It could be a band. Maybe somebody died like Freddie Mercury, whatever it may be. So there you go. Hit it.
All right. So, hi, everyone. I'm Heidy M, Heidy Morales. I am the founder of a website called Heidy's Musings, where I try to talk about arts and culture, mainly in the city of Toronto, from a different perspective that I think it's fresh and more of like a fan of the arts kind of point of view. Mm-hmm. I also do write film reviews for, I'm also accredited for Rotten Tomatoes. So I will occasionally write some interesting film reviews for people who want to read, but I also do interviews. So I am expanding into the video zone a little bit more these days so that people can digest some of the information in a shorter format. What else do I tell you, Sammy? So that is my website. I'll link it at the end once we wrap up. Mm-hmm. In terms of the icebreaker, who would I meet if I had a chance to meet? I will say for me is Tupac.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right? Mm-hmm. It's because, I was a fan of Tupac from the 90s, mm-hmm. Aging myself, but it's also about his artistry. I know that on the side of hip hop and rap, he was really hardcore, and, some people think it's very, the music is very, filled with a lot of curse words, but there's so much lyricism and storytelling in the music that I found that I really enjoyed. But I really, really liked him in films. I wanted to see more of him on screen. And it's unfortunate that we didn't get to see that side of his artist side.
Yeah.
So I want to just talk to him about all that stuff and what he thought about politics and the world and all that interesting stuff.
I'm gonna introduce myself in a second, but my for the icebreaker, I wanna meet and hang out with Prince. I think that would be just one day, just hang out with Prince and just see how he works, see how he operates. It would be kind of zany, and he'd probably yell at me or whatever and find me weird, but still just hang out with Prince, maybe even play some basketball with him. I think that would be so we both like the weird ones, I think is what we're getting at, right?
Yeah, I guess we are weird a little bit.
We are weird a little bit. So my name is Sammy. I host my summer Lair. It's a interview podcast similar to NPR Fresh Air or CBCQ, if you know any of those ones. But I kind of have a nerdy lens through which I ask questions and kind of talk to my guests. And I'm always looking for overlooked gems, things that are kind of unrecognized or unloved a little bit, right? And so you want to find like some really cool things and like check this out, right? You want to shine the bat light on certain things in popular culture. And so that's what I try and do, and I do it through the interview style. All right. By the way, I didn't know you did the Rotten Tomatoes thing, or maybe I should be paying attention. But how was that gig? This is a tangent, but we're gonna get into everything in a second. We're gonna talk about Podcamp mainly. But how was the Rotten Tomatoes gig?
Well, that was a few years ago when this is before the pandemic time, where they were actually looking to expand the critics that were being represented on their roster. So they had a call out to include more women and people of color. So, of course, if you know me, I check most those boxes.
The last name gives it away too, right?
Right. So essentially, it was just the timing was right. I was on certain email lists where they were announcing these sort of initiatives. It was also partly organized by this group called Time's Up, where I think it was a lot of women in film that were trying to push the boundaries a little bit. And I said, I'm going to take a chance. I'll fill out the application. And in a way, that was sort of a lucky break. So a few of us that I know locally in Toronto were able to get in on that.
That's cool. So, like I said, the topic today is Podcamp, and it's related to why I was asking about Rotten Tomatoes, because when you go to something like Podcamp, you consider yourself like an OG, like a veteran, because you've been doing this for a number of years now. You're not like the one who started like podcasting in 1990 or whatever before even people knew what podcasting was, but you've been doing this for like a while now, and you've got a number of interviews, you got blogs, you got all kinds of stuff. Do you feel like a veteran or an OG?
In some respects, I do feel like an OG because I have been doing this for a while in different formats, like you said. And in other ways, I don't feel so much like a veteran because there's still this sort of line or divide or weird boundary of legacy media, like old school, newspapers or even like websites that have more of a legacy vibe to them. And us like yourself and I who are doing alternative media reporting and interviewing. So in that sense, I feel like I'm not a veteran, even though I've been doing this for a while.
I've noticed that at like Podcamp, at least some of the people I talk to, because I'm closing in on 300 episodes with My Summer Lair, and people were like, wow, that's a lot, right? And like, I forgot who was talking to, but one person is like, I got 20 episodes. I'm like, whoa, man, like, keep going. Like, it's like when you meet a kid in high school or whatever, and they're like, oh, I have to like go home. I have to go home now, study for exams or whatever. I'm like, oh, I don't remember though. I don't like those days at all. Like, have a good time, buddy. And so it's interesting, but I also noticed too that like at Podcamp, a number of panelists before the session would start, they would kind of get the temperature of the room, and they would ask like, who here wants a podcast or starting a podcast? Who here has a podcast? And I've noticed that a lot more people were raising their hand for like who has a podcast, So I think that's one of the things that's interesting at Podcamp, just attending it over the last few years, is that I think the podcast community is growing in Toronto, or at least locally.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because this was my first year at Podcamp Toronto, and I know that you've gone before, and the event itself has been going on for a while. So I was going to ask you if you've noticed that there's a more larger number of people who are showing up and also who are saying, yes, I'm starting or I've started.
So it's interesting. I think when Podcamp first started, there was the first wave of people who were all excited to do podcasts. And then I think they found out how much hard work it is, right? It's not a simple matter of like you turn on the mics and then you hit record and then you go for like 20 minutes or whatever. I'll give you a quick tangent. So I used to run a network called Girth Radio. And so I'd get pitches every now and then. And this one guy, he gave me a pitch and he wanted to do an interview style show. I said, that's great. I said, so just to give me a sense of your style or your show or whatever, like what kind of guests would you get on your show? You know what I mean? Are you going to do like filmmakers? Like, are you going to do like feature films or documentaries? There's a big difference, right? Like that kind of stuff. And he's like, well, I was thinking for the first episode, I'll get like Kanye West. And the second episode, I'll get like George Clooney. And then the third one was Jennifer Aniston or something like that. I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. you know these people? Like, if you know these people, why are you hanging out with me? Like, you know what I mean? So I was like, you know these people? And he's like, no, but celebrities love going on podcasts. So once you have a podcast, you'll just get celebrities. I'm like, that's not how any of this works. Like, that was like, you know, when somebody says something that's so wrong that you don't even know where to start? There's like 5 things wrong in that sentence. And I think that's the first wave of like a podcasting where everyone just thought like, you know, you just hit record, celebrities show up, you hang out, and it's like it's really effortless. But I think that group got kind of like, they're the first people off the boat in D-Day, right? They unfortunately got killed off because it's just so hard and it's just so much work. And that's why, like, when you go to iTunes in a way is a graveyard, right? There's a lot of podcasts that started, and then you see like around episode 7, episode 10, that's it. And then the last episode they posted was like 2017 or 2018 or even 2020 or something, you know? And so now I think this group that's coming to Podcamp knows better, and I think they understand it's hard, and so they're more prepared to do the hard work, and put the time and effort in. Because you know this too, like, you know what I mean? It's not a simple matter of like, I saw a cool movie, or like, you know, I went to some Netflix premiere and then I'm like, this is it, and then you go take a nap.
It's so true. And I was going to say that people seem to be really willing to learn and take the advice that they offer at the Podcamp, different like workshops or, you know, sessions, which I thought was really cool. And they're also really willing to share themselves. Like the actual people that go to Podcamp, even in the audience, they're sharing like their own tips, which I thought was really nice, that people are just like, hey, don't reinvent the wheel, try this.
Yeah, and that's also neat too, because that's why I was asking you at the top, like, if you feel like a veteran, because you also know a little bit better now, like what works, what doesn't work, how to market, how to ask better questions in interviews, these kind of things. Because podcasting is one of those weird things where like you can do the easy stuff, right? You can Google and like find out which microphones to get, which recorders you get, or like what online subscription you can use to record. You can find all that stuff really easily. You test out a couple of mics, and then you figure out one that you like or one that's within your budget, and you're good to go. But then after that, then it's like, well, then what do I say? Right? That's the hard part. And sometimes people make it look effortless, right? Like, I think of somebody like George Stroumboulopoulos. Like, he's been on front of the camera for years. So when he does his little IG stories or whatever, they're effortless, but it's because he's got like 20, 30 years of like experience in front of the camera. So of course they look effortless. Of course he's just like funny and able to like come up with things quickly, whatever. I think people stumble at like how like bad it sounds. Because even now when I edit my episodes sometimes, I'm like, this question I asked wasn't even English at all. Like, it was just garbling. Like, how did the guest even understand what I'm asking? Like, I'm so embarrassed that, like, you know what I mean? It's like my first day with the English language or something.
I know. And there were, to even like give folks examples of some of the sessions at Podcamp this year. There were sort of tips like podcasting for beginners. There was one about that I went to on the second day on Sunday, which was getting rid of filler words. I'm guilty of doing a lot of right? Or because you're gathering your thoughts, and even just sort of getting to that stage where you feel more comfortable when you're speaking with someone.
I say like a lot, like a valley girl. I didn't realize that until you start editing. And then they're like, I say that a lot.
Right. And it's also, that comes also with your experience over time. You start noticing these things about yourself. So being aware of how you come across, like how you sound, getting over the fact of how your voice even sounds is another thing, right? And what else? There were a lot of sessions that I wish I could attend, but they were also like overlapping, or I didn't make it in time. But I did want to ask you if there was any session this year that you thought, oh, okay, I really got a lot out of it.
Yeah, one dude did one on AI, and AI kept coming up a couple of times in a number of sessions. People would mention it briefly, whatever. This guy did a whole thing on AI, but I find I think every industry is going to be has to deal with it differently. Like in film right now, they're struggling on terms of like, can you use AI to write a movie, to write a script? Like, can you replace a human, whatever? But in podcasting, I find that AI is really like useful. It's a real gift. You know what I mean? Like just even editing sometimes, just to level your sound, whatever. Let the robot do the work. You know what I mean? Because some people don't have access or the skills or the whatever to a professional editor or, you know what I mean? Like they'd rather just focus on just like putting the time and the creativity into the actual episode and just like push a magic button and let the robot do the thing. So I think AI is going to be an interesting challenge, like moving forward. And that's what this guy's like session was all about. Like, can you use it? Should you use it? I mean, I'm sure we're all doomed, right? Like, I know there's going to be a robot Skynet uprising. So we're all doomed, right? But until that happens, though, we're going to be able to put out a lot of cool podcasts.
I agree. And that's the session I really wanted to hear more about. It was by Hisham Kadomi. For anybody who's interested, I'm just looking up the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is. I agree with you that I think depending on the industry, you can take AI one way or the other. But I was telling you even this before we started the chat, in that I do want to teach myself how to use certain applications to make my podcasting or my interviewing better. And that's where AI is going to come in handy, because I have a day job. I can't be editing all day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like, you and I both have been doing this for a while. That's why I asked you again, like, if you feel like a veteran. And like, now what I've done is when I have my basic interview questions, like kind of jotted down, I have them in a Google Doc, I'll run them through AI. And I'm like, what do you think of these? And then it comes up with different angles, different perspectives, or like, what if you ask this or whatever? And I'm like, this is fascinating. Like, and so I'll sometimes kind of rewrite some of the questions that they give me back, and I'll ask them.
Uh-huh.
Because I'm not a fan of the, you know, like you've seen this before, where like sometimes people are like, oh, I'm interviewing William Shatner on Thursday. And they'll put out on social media a call for like questions from fans or whatever. If that's your show, that's great. Like, have a good time, do that. But I'm not a fan of that, right? And like, so I want to kind of like focus the conversation, go in a certain way. And like another example is there was a horror movie, and there was a young actress. She's on one of the high school girls on Jeannie in Georgia, but she was in this horror movie, and so she was like 17 or 19 when I talked to her. Anyways, we ended up just kind of sitting and chatting and talking about the horror movie, and we had a good conversation, and she left. So when I posted the interview, I got a whole bunch of like direct messages and IG from obviously like high school girls based on the spelling and the chat slang and whatever. And one girl's like, oh, you didn't ask her if she had a boyfriend. I'm like, first of all, I'm like an old dude talking to like a 17 or 19-year-old girl. I'm not going to ask her. That's creepy. Second of all, and I get it, like from a fan perspective, that's what you want. You want to know if she's like dating Tom Holland or something like that. I get that. But I'm like, another one was like, what does her hair smell like? Again, I don't smell my guest's hair. I'm sure her hair smelled very nice. You know what I mean? Like, but that's not for me to know at all. Like, and I'm not curious at all. But sometimes that's what I'm getting at. Is like sometimes fans have these kind of stranger questions or things that they want to know, and that, like, they're burning and have a desire to know. And I'm like, it doesn't always align with where my curiosity is. You know what I mean? I'm not curious. I was curious about the horror movie. I didn't really care how her hair smelled. I'm sure it was very nice, but I wasn't that curious about it.
But that's a good point, because that links to something they mentioned in one of the sessions, and I can't recall which one, but it was about having a mission for your podcast or what you're doing. Because like what you were saying is you like being, you're a nerdy person, so you have an angle of like asking about those things. I'm also a nerdy person about certain things in the arts and, you know, literature or whatever it is, film. So I will have certain angles, and I think that's sort of, there's room for all of these sort of podcasts to exist, or shows or websites.
Somebody else can ask her what her hair smells like, or who she's dating, right?
That is more appropriate. Yeah. It's also, I'm not interested in that, even if as a woman, I don't particularly care for those things. At the same time, it also makes me think of this sort of culture that we're in right now, or the celebrity culture of, why do we need to know those personal details when we really want to more enhance or talk about their art and their work?
Mm-hmm.
Some of us can exist, right? We can navigate that world, and then somebody else can look at that pop culture stuff, everyday who they're dating today and who they're going to date tomorrow.
Yeah, I was just like, it's a cool horror movie. So I sent the PR lady an email. I'm like, that's it. Like, hair smelling. Another question I got from like one of the, like, did you, like the letter U, not Y-O-U? Like again, like, it's clearly like high school girls. Did you ask her like what brand of, she was wearing a sweater. So there was a photo I posted. She's like, did you ask her what sweater she was wearing? I'm like, no, not at all. And you know what too? That interview, this is a side thing too. That interview ruined me because you know how like that year Spotify does that Spotify Wrapped, right? And it's like gives you like a breakdown of your audience and who they are, whatever. And then one of the elements that they give you was like, you know, your audience listens to like Bruce Springsteen or your audience listens to whatever. They'll give you like a couple of bands that your audience listens to. That year when I ran my Spotify Wrapped, it said my audience listens to Taylor Swift. I'm like, no, it's not. That's not right. Like, my audience tends to be a little bit more older, a little bit more male than female. So I was like, that's... And I realized it was that girl's interview. She skewed the whole thing because all the girls came and Spotify was like, this guy's pulling it with the Taylor Swift crowd. I'm like, not at all. So,
but that's not bad, right? You know, for one of those years, it's not a bad thing.
No, it's not bad, but it's just like I just want to go back to my regular audience, like my people who get sarcasm and like know like a CD and like a typewriter, like those are my people, right?
But that's the thing about also interviewing or speaking with people who navigate different worlds, even as artists. Like some people will know her from specific other work, and you might just know her from the horror. Like, it's the same thing. I also watch a lot of horror, but other people don't care for horror. So it's almost like a few of us will understand certain parts of that artist's work, and then the other, not our interest.
So on that note, I have one guy, one fan, an only fan, no S, an only fan, in Alabama. He comes out, he will download any like a super sci-fi movie or sci-fi TV show, anything that I do like that. He comes out, he downloads the episode, and he leaves. If I interview like a regular Netflix thing or a stand-up comic or anything like that, no interest whatsoever. Alabama comes through for sci-fi only. And I'm like, it's always just the one download in Alabama for every sci-fi thing I drop. But I'm like, yo, man, tell a friend. Like, don't you talk to somebody? You keep coming back to these episodes. You know what I mean? It's not like he downloaded it once and then left. He keeps coming back for sci-fi. He's like, let's see what Sammy's got any sci-fi guests or whatever. I'm like, ooh, like, I like this movie. So then he like takes it. But I'm like, tell a friend. Like, don't you talk to somebody in Alabama to like connect and like have fun? Nope. Just like by himself.
So that brings me to the session around building community, right? Because clearly you're noticing patterns in the people that are your audience, your listeners. And did you think of that session around like community building and kind of outreach? Because it's also more work, right? People, like, everything that was discussed in the session was really helpful. I'll have to find the name of the person. I think it's Shirley, what's her name? But I found it really informative, but at the same time, it is work, right? So it's navigating the workload while trying to build your followers, your community. What did you get out of that?
Well, so one thing that I've noticed, and like, this is, you were talking about before about older podcamps. I've been going to podcamps since it started. And even in general, you can back me up. I don't have any like specific metrics or anything like this to prove this. But when you go out in life, you don't see a lot of like podcast t-shirts, right? You see like a lot of band t-shirts. You see a lot of NBA t-shirts. We're both in Toronto. We see a lot of Raptors t-shirts, Blue Jays t-shirts. You see a lot of concert t-shirts. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you see a lot of like podcast t-shirts?
No.
Yeah. And that's kind of strange to me too, because like podcasts do make money from merch. So people are buying them, right? I guess maybe they're just like sleeping in them or something. But so it's interesting, like in terms of how a community kind of forms, because like when you see people with a band t-shirt or like a Raptors t-shirt, like you know already a few things about that person, right?
Right.
Generally, if it's like a Raptors t-shirt, you know that they probably like some hip hop, a little bit of hip hop probably, you know what I mean? They probably like watch other like basketball teams too, just because it's like they like basketball, so they like, probably like Steph Curry, for example. there's like 3 or 4 things you can kind of generally assume about a person, right? So if you were at a party, you can have an icebreaker. But with podcasting, it's really strange because it's like there is no quote unquote way to show your gang colors, right? And that's what I find kind of curious about the community. It's a weird thing because it's like, yes, like when I look at my stats, whatever, people are downloading the episode. So somebody is, right? Assuming it's not some like bot in Russia, right? Like that guy in Alabama, I'm assuming he's a real guy, right? He's like, oh, Sammy's got a sci-fi show from Amazon. Let's hit play on this. But so the community is interesting because it's like it can be online and it can be offline. And offline is weird because I haven't figured out how the offline world works. But online, it's very easy to manage, right? In terms of like, you know, you have followers on Twitter, you get instant messages on IG, that kind of thing, whatever. It's easier that sense. But I'm curious to know how you connect and build one offline. Does that make sense?
Right. Yes. Oh, yeah, totally makes sense. So the session was by Shirley Joseph, and she does the Black Canadian creators for anyone who's curious.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you about this offline community because I noticed that a lot of people are doing this Discourse or is it Slack, which are these other web-based apps for chatting and connecting, as well as newsletters. But again, that's, to me, it sounds great if you have time. Mm-hmm. And I know that you have to initially invest time and then things will roll out and won't take as long. But I think for me, it's, even though I've been doing this for a while, I've hesitated to do the newsletter because my followers fluctuate in terms of numbers. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to invest the time if I think my engagement is better online. Like, let's say social media, like Instagram, IG, for example, better than maybe a newsletter. Also, because when I think of myself as somebody who gets a lot of emails, mm-hmm. do I always read the newsletters? Probably not. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking of, I'm also in a demographic that is, it's like 3 age groups sort of, mm-hmm. almost evenly split. So I also have to think of like, who would even click on this email to look at the newsletter if I start one? Or are they more likely to go to my social media because I might even post a photo of my cute little friend's dog and then, you know, make content that way, right? Or so thinking of novel ways to stay engaged online. Mm-hmm. And you probably know this about me, but I also do go out a lot in the city of Toronto. So I do have in-person community connections that way.
Mm-hmm. That so probably works a lot better too, right? Just kind of like...
Instead of the newsletter, I do the in-person thing.
The in-person I find is like when you can kind of connect, like Podcamp is a good thing for this, right? Because you can remind you, like somebody said to me at Podcamp, oh, Sammy, I haven't listened to your show in a while, like just by seeing me, right? And so it's like, that's good. Like, go hit play on something, right? Like, so I think that's sometimes too is like, you know, you and I were talking before about like getting overwhelmed with like sometimes pop culture because there's so many podcasts, and then Netflix puts out a new season of Stranger Things, and everybody's talking about Stranger Things, right? And so you got to go watch that because you don't want to be left out or whatever, or like everybody at work is talking about Stranger Things and you're not in the conversation. And then Beyonce dropped an album. I'm like, oh, right? And then you got to listen to that or whatever, and things like pop culture can sometimes be overwhelming, and it's hard to like navigate a lot of that, you know. And I think that's sometimes too where people like, all right, like they kind of prioritize, right? And
well, just like what you were saying, right? You also even for your podcast, you focus on certain things that are a little bit more, maybe not mainstream pop culture, but they're also still pretty interesting. Like I know you're telling me about this documentary I want to watch, like, you know, because we both get a lot of emails about potential show ideas or mm-hmm. write-up. And sometimes we might miss it because, like you said, we're just overwhelmed. We're just really busy, which mm-hmm. is true. We're busy people. And we may miss out. But I think wanting to stay a little bit niche is helpful for some of the content that we create, because then that means somebody's like, oh, I've never heard of this. Let me try and hear more about this.
You're good at that because you do like plays, right? You do theater. You're classy like that, right? I wear a tuxedo t-shirt, so I'm clearly not classy at all. So I'm the opposite of you. I really shouldn't even be hanging out with you. But it's like, but that's good too because it's like there's a lot of stuff like me that does like movies and documentaries and stuff like that, and there's a lot of podcasts like that, right? And blogs and Rotten Tomatoes and things like that. A lot of outlets for that. But for theater, that can get a little bit that can get really thin, right? And so you want somebody that knows the stuff, or like if people get to know your taste after a while, like they know where you're coming from, right? So when a new play opens, they're like, "Oh, I wonder what she thinks about this."
Yeah, and I think the idea is also, even within theater, I do, because I do enjoy the experience of being in a theater, watching live theater. But I also think about it in terms of accessibility, right? Because not everybody knows about the different theater companies in the one city of Toronto. There's so many, and I can't see all of them. But I think even just if I can introduce you to a show, and maybe it's only ran for a weekend, but you remember for next time, like, you'll follow that company, you'll know their work is good. Like that's part of my mission too, in terms of moving perhaps into more video content, so that people are kind of also seeing a little bit of what people are creating in the city. But you're right, the theater part I think is kind of interesting, and hopefully it does have an audience, because I know film will always have an audience.
Yeah, we've made our choice, right? Like, But for you then, because you're doing the theater part, and the theater is it's a community gathering, does that make it easier then for you to build the community offline or online?
I think because the state of the world right now is still online. Offline, in person, the one thing is, what's nice about Toronto is that the actors will work with different theater companies, so they already kind of know each other, and then they'll start to get to know someone like me because I show up or I've interviewed them, right? So I think that's why I'm leaning more towards maybe interviewing people, not so much doing a review. I might give you some thoughts about the show, but the experience is so subjective that I don't want to rate theater, right? Because there's something for everybody if you're willing to be open-minded. And because I'm doing more of these sort of, let's talk to the artist, then they recognize me when I'm on site, or I've gone to the show. Like I won't go to the show that I interviewed them for, but I go to a different show where they're in. And that's sort of building the offline community with the artist. And then they'll be like, hey, I talked to so-and-so, and they'll spread the word that way too.
This is a tangent, but let's go down this road for a little bit, because I find that with theater, actually, let me start again. With film, there's a bit of a shorthand. So when you see a trailer, you kind of already know the vibe or whatever. If it's a murder mystery or horror, you kind of know the tone a little bit, the vibe. You kind of know what you're getting into, right? And with theater, sometimes when you see images of the show or you read the description, that shorthand is not quite there. So you're like, is this a comedy? Like, you can't tell sometimes, you know what I mean? But when you like with a film, when you see the trailer, I'm like, this is a comedy. I get it. Like, it's got Will Ferrell in it. I'm all right. I'm in, right? Like, you really kind of know. And so theater sometimes is a little bit of work, because like they don't have that same shorthand as it does for like film.
Right. And some theater does have a bit of a shorthand. If people know Shakespeare, they know Shakespeare.
Right.
Kind of. Like those bigger sort of, plays. But you're right. If it's like a small company that is doing, I don't know, maybe something with dance, and people are like, I don't know if I understand dance, and then sometimes that's why speaking to the people creating the shows makes sense, because it's like, what do you really want people to like be excited about, right? Because clearly you're creating this show for a reason. You're excited. So what should people be excited about? So instead of a trailer, let's kind of get people excited,
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So at Podcamp, then, what else stood out to you? I talked about the AI stuff. We talked about the community stuff. What else stood out to you?
There was one of the last sessions on the second day, the Sunday, was one of the last ones, which was around, what did I tell you? With a filler word. I can't remember right now. Why is it escaping me? And the session was called Words from Your Mouth by Sean Savage, but it was around catching yourself with filler words. And we were talking about this before offline, how when we're conversing, we have things like, like, or repeat certain phrases again and again, like, you know what I mean? Like, and because it's a natural flow of conversation, but when we're doing a podcast, sometimes we're using the filler words because we're trying to gather our thoughts or find our place again if we're not maybe organized that day with our notes.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of sort of finding a rhythm within your even conversation style. If you want to do interviews, you can still be conversational, but find a rhythm where you're calm, your mouth isn't going faster than your brain.
Right.
And some of the tips from that session were about meditating, not in the long form, but even just taking like a minute or 2 minutes of getting into your breath,
mm-hmm.
catching yourself and being calm. And at the same time, another trick or tip is imagine that you have punctuation. If you don't have notes in front of you, like on a notepad or a Google Doc, imagine you're going to have punctuation. Where would you put the comma as you're speaking? And it's all about practicing that, right? At first, it probably seems not so intuitive, but the more you kind of think about it that way, you'll have natural pauses. You're going to allow the other person to also have like a similar kind of vibe
mm-hmm.
because you're staying calm and there's not a lot of rush. So which I thought were great tips.
Mm-hmm.
My concern sometimes is when when you're doing like a press junket and they're like, okay, you have like 10, 15 minutes. And then you're like, I just did a filler word. You are mindful of the time, and maybe you are really calm in the beginning, but then you're noticing that they're giving you in the chat 5 minutes left, right? So that could affect the flow of the conversation. So that session was helpful because some of the things I already knew, but they were really good refreshers for those of us who have been doing this interviews style for a while. And also a reminder of keeping your notes. Like if there are questions that you definitely want to ask, then have them ready to go. You do this because you prepare questions too. So just make sure that you have the questions you want to ask. And the same thing you said about Sam Roberts to me earlier, which is you have an angle, you're nerdy. There's certain things he nerds out on. That will also get you more time with this person.
Mm-hmm.
Interviewing. And it's true. Do your research or find a theme that they're really interested in that is not always the same 5 questions that they get from somebody else.
Yeah, I find like with interview, and you might have noticed this too when you do research, if you have a guest or filmmaker coming up and you go listen to some other podcasts where he's been interviewed, sometimes people, like the interviewer will kind of overpower the guest. Right? They tell too many stories or like, you know what I mean? And they want to talk about what the movie meant to them rather than letting the guy who made the movie kind of unpack it a little bit more. And like, these are some of the themes in there or whatever. I find that like the interviews are, when they work well, the interview podcasts are like a good first date, right? So you both get a couple of times to make some jokes. You both get to kind of communicate. Maybe the guest will tell you a secret or two. They flick their hair, and then you kind of go on your way, right? You want to have a good first date. And generally, if you, like you were saying before, we're like with the press junkets, that like finding an angle and connecting with them. If you have a good first date, there's an opportunity for you to have a second date. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I remember her. She was really cool, and like she asked me these questions, whatever, right? And so I think it's that kind of connection. But I've also learned too, all the tips that you took from Sean from that session are great. But I've also learned too, doing interviews, is that sometimes, unlike first dates can be good, but first dates can also be bad. And so when you don't have chemistry, or that person doesn't want to be there, or they're whatever mood, shut it down. Right?
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Like, pull the rip cord and get out of there. Right? Like,
yeah, like I could have shown up with my red lipstick, but he's not gonna go with it.
Right? Like,
yeah, nothing's gonna work.
Nothing. You're not flicking your hair or nothing. So I was like, I'm out of here. Right?
Like my cool questions are not cool. It doesn't matter because you're right. But it could have been that something happened before they sat down to the next interview, and you do the next interview. Like you have no control over a lot of those things. So you are right, and that's why I prefer when I can, I will control when. Like a day and time when I speak with, unless it's obviously absolutely impossible, then I'll do the press junkets. But my preference is that I don't. do them for that reason. I wanted to ask you about the session on the Saturday by Marco Timpano.
That guy was crazy. 10. He's so cool.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, what did you like about that session?
Two things. One is he had a lot of energy, all right? And so and the other thing was he was super excited about podcasting. Like he wants you to make a good podcast, whoever you may be. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's one of the things that was really infectious about him. Like he wrote a book called, I think it's called 25 Things. Is that what it's called? 25 Things I Wish I Learned About Podcasting before I started. Uh-huh. It's like a ridiculous title. Right? And so he really wants to share the knowledge. You talked about that before, where people, even in like people who were not even teaching the sessions or whatever, were raising their hand and sharing tips and tricks and whatever. And that's really like where he's the avatar or the patron saint, I guess, of Podcamp, because he's funny and he's sarcastic, but he really wants you to make a good podcast, and he's going to give you all kinds of knowledge to like help you make and develop a really good podcast. He does a lot of stuff with Ali Hassan as well, right? And so,
right, yes.
And again, like Ali comes from stand up, so he's very smooth. He's very comfortable with the mic. Right, and so I'm sure he's learned quite a bit just hanging out with somebody like Ali, right? So that was a fun one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that too, because it was very much also, I liked his style too. He was giving you information, but he was also pacing around using the whiteboard so that you could get the information in whichever way worked for you. And he was also kind of engaging back with the people in the room, like, so what's your name? What do you do? And kind of giving you examples based on what people were saying in terms of the tips and that you could use in creating your podcast. And I think it also, what I liked about this session was also that he made, at least for me, it made me feel like, okay, yeah, I can do it.
Yes.
Yeah. I can do this.
Yeah, and I think that's really what he wants you to do. He recognizes this is an amazing opportunity, an amazing art form, and it is a lot of work, and he acknowledged that. But at the same time, you can have so much fun. Like he had all kinds of stories and things he was telling us, right? Like, you know, and like as you do this, as you keep going through this, you will have these connections and these moments and like you meet a lot of interesting people and a lot of cool creative people, and it's an incredible opportunity to like push record and to host a podcast. And that's really what, like, that's why I said he's like the patron saint of like Podcamp, basically, because that's really like the type of person that you want hosting a session at Podcamp. Somebody is gonna make you feel energized and like, yeah, I want to go do this, right?
Right. Yeah, and I appreciated that he was part of the the afternoon programming. So it also kind of left you, that day ended with like a really uplifting message, like, yeah, you can do it, you can start now, you know, don't fret about the other stuff. So I think it was sort of like a nice way to end that first day, at least for me, because it was my first time, and I'm like, okay, if this is what Podcamp is like, then yeah, I'm here again tomorrow, you know. I'm home with some really useful information.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too with like podcasting, and I think that's why sometimes people get a little uncomfortable with it, is because when you're in school, right, you get assigned to do an essay, and they tell you how many words. It's got to be 1,500 words, double space, it's got to be on this book, whatever. You get all these details, and with podcasting, there is no homework, right? It can be, your podcast can be 5 minutes. It could be like Joe Rogan's is 3 hours or whatever. Like, there's no, like, you know, if you put out a 20-minute podcast, that's fine. So is the dude who put out a 2-minute podcast. That's fine too. And it becomes, I think that lack of structure sometimes intimidates people, right?
Right.
They're like, how do I do this? I'm like, however you want is the correct answer, you know? Right. Just make sure you introduce yourself, introduce your name, give people a way to follow you, either on like by subscribing or like on social media, and then that's it. Go. Have a good time. Right? There is no right or wrong way to do this. And that's, I think, where his kind of energy comes from, because it's like he wants you to do it, but do it your own way, do it your own style.
I think so. And I think that's also the stuff that we need to hear. And as I was saying to you earlier, Sammy, before we really started discussion was I'm moving away from writing long form, like actually writing long form content for my website. I'll still have my website because I think it's a good website.
Mm-hmm.
If I say so myself, and I can still share information there, but I feel that I'm just moving more towards the video content because I enjoy doing it. I'm not going to lie, I enjoy it, even if it takes a little bit more work. But I think that's also where our audiences are at right now in terms of wanting to hear about interesting and cool things. Like YouTube is huge
Mm-hmm.
In that sense for that reason, and I think it's not going to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can always, the other thing that was cool about being at Podcamp is like you can turn like your episode, use that content and do trailers, and it feeds into social media kind of really nicely. So I think that's sort of my takeaway message from Podcamp, even if it was my first year, is that I could probably do more of the video content than I actually thought I could.
You should. You're good at that. And I'm trying to remember which panel it was. I was there for Saturday and Sunday, so I attended a bunch of stuff. But the takeaway was, I thought this was interesting, which was that our generation says Google it when they're looking up something, right? Like, oh, I've never heard of this documentary. I never heard of this Netflix show. Google it, right? That's what we do.
Right.
But the younger kids and stuff like this, they use search or they look it up. They don't use Google it because they're going right to YouTube and TikTok and things like that. So they're bypassing Google and going to YouTube and TikTok. So that's how they talk. And I realized that sometimes in my call to action at the end of my episodes, I'll I have a newsletter. You can Google it if you want to see it. Like that's what I was saying before. Like that's why when Spotify says your target demographic listens to like Taylor Swift, I'm like, no, it doesn't. I always say Google it like at the end of the episode. Like no, not at all. I'm talking to people of my generation who still go to Google to look up stuff, but the younger kids are like look it up or search it. So that's also interesting too to see how like the transition will break down with all this stuff. Like you said, YouTube's not going away. YouTube's probably going to get more important as it goes along, and as TikTok and things like that as more of a visual medium. So you going into video is probably much more smarter than me who's still sticking with audio.
Well, but there's room for audio too, right? Because even if you do audio, I mean, this is kind of it's a bit of a tangent, but you could still use YouTube, and if you combine the audio with some visuals, you can still do that in an existing YouTube, right?
Yeah.
I'm the person that kind of wants to do everything all at once. So I have audio and I have video and I have and social media. So now I'm like, okay, take a breather here. How do we organize it better? I think there's room for audio because sometimes I still listen to things, especially if I'm working. The video, I enjoy it, but sometimes it's distracting for me if I'm working on my day job stuff. But there are occasions where I just want to watch and hear what people are saying. So I do use all three myself. Maybe that's why I'm trying to do all of it, because I do read online and I do listen and I do watch YouTube University for things,
Yeah. But and I mean, there's SEO, there's all these kind of other factors, right? Like, so I get it. But I mean, and audio will always be around because people always have to clean their houses or their homes, right?
Absolutely.
Or wash dishes or whatever. Or walk the dog. Like, I get it, right? Like, there's always going to be opportunity for audio. It's not like going away either. But yeah. So then I guess like with that session we talked about with Marco, you feel like Podcamp was good for you, right? Like you kind of felt energized, or you kind of have more direction, or you got some tips enough to like know what to do next?
Yeah, I think maybe I don't know what to do next per se, because I have to teach myself a few things still. If I do want to gravitate to more video podcasting or video content in general, but I feel like it was the right time for me because I was already thinking of what am I doing next? How am I going to either enhance what I'm doing or where am I going, right? Because, I mean, I haven't said it out loud, but I have been doing the Heidy Musings thing for 15 years, and that's a lot. And I also need to streamline my own time better. So I think it's more about, it may sound selfish, but it really is about, for my own sake, what makes sense. And camp was good that way. It was also good in terms of, well, yes, I know you, Sammy, but I got to connect with you and meet other people. And you also introduced me to some really interesting folks too that were also giving me information that was kind of cool and helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did like the vibe of the entire weekend. And the fact that the content is useful, even if I don't go to all the sessions, there's always something that I think I can take away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what about these events. If the event is going to give me something to take home, it's worth my time. And we haven't even said this yet, but I mean, it's also free. How cool is that?
Yeah, that's really neat. Yeah, I know. Like, it is an opportunity to like connect with people and learn all that stuff, but it is free, and so that barrier is also makes it easier for people, right?
I was telling friends about it afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Other friends that I think could maybe benefit from it. I was telling people about it.
Yeah, I hope that they continue like growing the conference. I hope that more people kind of show up and like more like veterans as well, people who have seen things, right? Like the Vietnam vets, right? Like they've seen horrors, they've lost episodes, right? Or like the microphone broke in the middle of like they're doing an interview with The Rock or something like that. You know what I mean? Like you want people who have like the horror stories as well. Because right. It's like that's where like you build that connection with the community, right? You and I were talking about before with the online and offline community, and that's for your fans or for people who listen to podcasts or to your stuff specifically. But at the same time, you also need to build within the community of Toronto itself, all the other artists and all the other podcasters and TikTok influencers or whatever it may be, whoever like whatever digital creators are kind of hanging around. You also want to connect with them because you learn so much from them.
Right. And I think we also learn from the people that are doing stuff now that are fresh, whereas I've been around for a while doing all kinds of things. So it's cool to see what people are doing who are just kind of starting out and maybe, you know, they're using more AI. So what are you using, right? Maybe I like that app or, you know, I think it's the same way that I like working with students in my 9 to 5, right? Like I like working with younger folks and students because they're like learning stuff of the now, which means me a few things to make my life easier, right?
And I think that's also the as we're kind of wrapping up, I think that's a good takeaway because like I asked you if you feel like a OG or veteran, but the truth is like even though you have been doing this for 15 years, there's still so much to learn. Like,
right?
You know what I mean? Like, you know, I sometimes will like I finish an episode or whatever. I'm like, that was a really good interview, and I'm really proud of it, and I'll post it, whatever, and I'll share it or whatever. And then the next day, I'll do another interview, and I'm like, this was terrible. These questions were stupid, and like, you know what I mean? And the guest was bored, and is like, what kind of idiot questions are these? You know what I mean? And so it's like, there's always like that steep learning curve. It almost doesn't stop being a steep learning curve in a way. You know what I mean? It's all like the streets of San Francisco. You know what I mean? How they're all like down and twisty and whatever. That's how it feels like with podcasting. It's like you're always driving in San Francisco.
But it's also cool because then people will see how you've evolved too, right? It's kind of like, it's almost like a chronicle of time and even like the people that you started interviewing. And if you do have, like you said, a second or a third date, if you speak to the same people again, like where are they at now? Like it really is cool that you can grow that way.
Yeah, I find podcasting tons of fun. Like, as much as, like I said up front, like, it is a ton of work, and it is a ton of work to do it well, to, like, care. Like, and that's the funny thing, too. Like, we didn't even touch upon this. Like, just, like, caring is such a simple thing. Like, for all the tips and tricks you just talk about, like, you know, center yourself, take a deep breath, like, know your filler words. All those things are all valuable, but at the basic core, one of the things that like we overlook so much for like everything, it doesn't matter if it's in film or theater, which you kind of cover, like just caring, giving a damn makes such a big difference. And you can tell the people who care, you know what I mean, and want to get it right.
And that you also care about the people you're like your guests, right? You want to make sure that they feel like you're really interested in what they're doing. Like you're almost, you know, you're a fan as much as the next person. And I think that's really what makes it worthwhile for you to have like over 300 episodes, for example, right?
Yeah. So you're going to come back to Podcamp again next year?
Yes, I hope that they're going to do it again. I think they are, so for sure. And now I'm going to be more vocal about it.
Okay.
If we can get more people to come.
Yeah. All right. That's the whole point, right?
That's the whole point.
Yeah. Do you have anything exciting coming up, or where can people find your stuff, your writing, your videos, your interviews, your theater recommendations?
So the main website is hymusings.ca. So it's HYEM as in mother, USINGS.ca. On the socials, I'm at High Musings, HYEMUSINGS. And in terms of anything cool happening is, yes, I'm preparing a couple of interviews. I want to plug Toronto's Sketch Comedy Festival that's coming up.
Oh, yeah. When is that coming up?
That starts, I think, next week, Sammy. I don't have the dates right in front of me, but I will say I don't go to all of the evenings because obviously it's almost like a week long, I believe. But you always find something fun and like really funny people. And I know this year the Tall Boys are coming back.
Oh,
if you know the truth.
Yeah, tell people who don't know who the Tall Boys are.
Oh man, who are they, Sammy? I'm blanking out. So the Tall Boys are a sketch troupe or a comedy, quote unquote, boy band, as they call themselves.
That's the word. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're made up of Tim Blair, Vance Bansal, Franco Nguyen, and Glit Abdi. They started in 2016 in Toronto. Basically, they were doing the Toronto stand-up comedy scene, and they've gone to do not just Toronto Sketch Fest, but winning awards around Montreal Sketch Fest, Toronto Fringe. They even created a show that was on the CBC.
Nice. Okay. And also coming up is towards the end of March, they're going to do the announcement for Hot Docs.
Yes.
And tell us, did you apply for media as well for Hot Docs? And you'll be covering that as well?
You know it. I'm a documentary nerd. So you're coming to the festival.
Yes.
Everybody come watch some documentaries. I encourage you to come. The festival itself is late April, early May, but we'll definitely know more at the end of March.
Yeah, it's one of our, I find it's one of our better film festivals in the city. You know what I mean? And that, I think, like Podcamp is also growing. Like, there's much more hunger now for like documentaries, because I think as people, like, it's interesting, I think with news, I think people are going towards more news podcasts and things like that. The New York Times has podcasts as well now. I think that kind of like is building an appetite so that people now want the longer form story, which is what a documentary is great at, right? So,
yeah, totally. Yeah, it's also a different way to engage with what's happening in the world, and also seeing. What I love about documentaries is that you also meet people who are directly affected by whatever it is the film is about, and then you can learn more because you relate to the subject from a personal point of view.
Yeah. And you can also, like, you just get a window to that world, right? Like, I don't want to see, like, I don't want to be in the middle of Ukraine or whatever, in the middle of that Russian invasion, right? Like, but if you have some cameras there and I can safely watch it at home, that's fine. Like, you know what I mean? Because, like, that's a horrible existence. Like, sometimes running out of water, out of food, things like that. Like, the shelling and stuff like that. Like, that's awful that people have to go through that. But again, if you can just get a window to that world, which sometimes the day-to-day news, the 6 o'clock news sometimes overlooks or can't convey that properly. A documentary is good at that, giving you a window into that world. So yeah, Hot Docs is coming up. I'm actually going to be covering Toronto Comic-Con. Nerdy. That's coming up. This is the smaller one. So in Toronto, we have two. We have Fan Expo, which is beginning of September, and this is a Fan Expo is much larger. It's like comic books and horror and anime and sci-fi and video games. There's too much going on. So Toronto Comic-Con is, like, as the name suggests, it's a lot more like comics. Although they have a number of Star Trek actors coming this year, but for the most part, it is much more local, much more smaller thing coming up. So I just got media approved for that, so I will be covering that. So hopefully I'm
happy you're going. I want to go, but I'm probably not going to cover it because it's probably a bit much given what I'm working on right now. But I will say for people, Comic-Con is probably one of the better ones to get a taste of all that fun stuff that's nerdy. I've always enjoyed my time there.
Yeah, and I find for the Comic-Con, like, it's good too if you have younger kids, like 10 and under kids, right? Like, it's a lot more manageable, right? Because it's Fan Expo, I think it's now either the second or third largest Comic-Con. It's like San Diego and New York City and Fan Expo here in Toronto. And so it can be just overwhelming, all right? Like, especially for like a younger kid, like there's too much happening and like it's like a sugar rush, right? Where Comic-Con is a lot more like centered, a lot more controlled. So it's easy to kind of, and they can still see like nerds dressed up as like Captain America, Wolverine, or whatever the kid is into, or whatever, right? Like when I go to Fan Expo now, like that's also a test for me to see if I recognize the characters of who these people are.
Right.
So, anime is not my world, so I don't know. So sometimes you'll see like Chinese girls dressed up as something or whatever, and you're like, I don't know who this character is. But like, you have purple hair and that big, huge plastic sword. I'm like, good luck with that. Like, I don't know what that is. Have fun, enjoy that. But other times, yeah. And then sometimes I find too, this is a tangent, but I find that sometimes people go like over the top. Last Fan Expo I went to, it was a girl. She was a female Joker, but she did it steampunk. So she was like a female Joker in this like Victorian outfit with like the steampunk goggles. And I'm like, you can't like steampunk Joker and then gender. And like, it's just a lot of stuff going on. Like, you know what I mean? So
well, there's also creativity in that, you know?
There is, yeah. But I was like, man, that's a lot of work. So yeah, so she's steampunk Victorian era female Joker. I was like, oh man, all right. So
I think it's kind of cool that people feel like, but you still got the reference of the Joker, right? So maybe it's not for a particular age group, but the fact that you can still reference like the main character, it's still there somewhere. You are right, though. Fan Expo has a lot of diversity that way. That it's true. If you don't know the shows, like, don't feel bad because there is a lot of cool stuff out there. Like, I know anime, but my anime knowledge is like 10%.
Yeah. And I'm not a video game either. Like, I'm not a video game guy either. So there's a whole bunch of like characters or whatever. Like, I was talking to like one dude last year and he's like, it's from Silent Hill. I'm like, all right, sure. I'm like, again, like, go with God. Like, if you have a good time with that and that's what your jam is, enjoy it. Like, you know what I mean? I'm sure the people who know Silent Hill and other video games are like, this is amazing. Right?
But I'm going to bring it back to the podcasting part, which basically shows you there's an audience for anything.
There is, all right? And that's what's amazing. Like, I'm always amazed when I put out an episode and like it gets downloads. Like, people listen to it like, you like, how did you find this, or what were you looking at, what were you Googling? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm always amazed and always grateful that people are like, yo, this is fresh, I'm going to push play on this. Like, because you have so many options, right? There is a market for everything, but that also means that people have so many options. Right?
That's true. It's a balance, right? There's always going to be a balance of like, there's audience for everything. And then there are times when it is going to be a lot.
All right. And so my show is My Summer Lair, and you can follow it on all three, IG, Twitter, and Facebook at My Summer Lair. I actually do put out a newsletter, My Pal Sammy. So it's a lot of fun. So you can look up that. It's on Substack, My Pal Sammy. But I think you going into video, I think committing to video, I think that's great. I think that's where your strengths are. And so I'm looking forward to see what you create.
Sounds good. Thank you, Sammy.
Yeah, so that's Podcamp. I'll put the link in for Podcamp. Hopefully they sometimes do throughout the year, they'll have podcast meetups. Random, like we need to kind of do that on a regular basis, or like have a monthly meeting or some sort of standing meeting every couple of months or something like that. But like just to kind of connect more with the community, as we were talking about, like the offline community, and meet people and check in, get some tips and stuff like that. But so I guess this should be our new tradition now. Every year we'll just do like a Podcamp like wrap up. It sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Thank you, Heidi, so much for like hanging out. Like we covered quite a bit, didn't we?
I think so, with a few tangents, but that's how it goes.
Yeah, that's how it goes. That's it.